Okay, we're going to get started. Future trends playing on the hospitality industry, just in case you want to make sure you're in the right place. My name's Wes. I'm with the Tri-Societies in Madison, Wisconsin. That's the American Society of Agronomy, Crop and Soil Science. I'm just the announcer, but I just thought I'd let you know who I am. This session does count towards certification. If any of you are interested or would like certification for attending, please silence your phones. Probably heard that. The app, if you haven't downloaded it, would be recommended to download it this time when you get a chance. Also, at the end of the session, you could take the survey, which is available through the app, which would be nice to see some results from that. This session is posted on the ACCESSE website. It's also audio recorded, but it'll be available in a couple of weeks, so it wouldn't be available right away, but you could go back and listen in. So I want to announce the speakers and the panelists here. So make sure I get it right. So Gary Schirrmacher is with Experian. He's right here. Dave Sapinski is with Conference Direct, also one of the panelists. Rocco LaForgia with Hilton. Melanie Caranda is with Business Events Canada, right here. And then our two moderators, Lizzie Seymour and Tony Giametti. Tony's down there in the end. And so those two will moderate and try to direct the session, and then there'll be chances for questions along the way. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Wes, and welcome everybody. We're excited to be here. Again, I'm Lizzie Seymour. I'm the manager of conference services with ASHRAE, and my colleague Tony Giametti is the senior manager of conference programs with ASHRAE as well. So first, thank you to our panelists for joining us today. We want to touch first, each panelist will be given about 5 minutes to do a quick presentation on some of their hot topics about what's going on in the hospitality industry. So how this will work is each panelist will do their quick presentation. We'll take just a minute in between presentations for the audience to ask any kind of clarifying questions about the presentation. Once everyone's gotten through their presentations, Tony and I have a few questions, and of course we'll open it up. As you can see, we have 2 floor mics available, but this is really intended to be a discussion and an engagement session as well. So please come with questions. I don't think anything's off limits, right? Right. Perfect. So let's get started with Melanie.
Okay, I'm here. Okay, so I thought a lot about this, you know, the outside influences that are affecting meetings and conventions and events right now. I am based in the United States, in Chicago, because most of our clients are in the US that bring their meetings, conventions, and events to Canada. And so I have found a couple of things just recently. I wanted to be topical in the sense that there are new travel policies that are in effect. And I think we know that we've heard this, but I think what's happening when you go to different websites like the State Department and so forth, there's varying degrees of information. It's not really clear. But what we were able to garner from it is that GBTA, which is the Global Business Travel Association, they predict if this travel ban goes into effect in 2017, there will be a 1.3, I think that's it's $1 billion that the travel industry will lose. So what the travel ban is, they're basically 6 countries from Muslim religious areas. They've taken Iraq off that list. So I think right now, as it stands, it's 5. And so they anticipate they could lose up to 4,200 jobs just, you know, for the people that are working in hotels, working as taxi drivers, working as hotel staff. All of that 4,200 jobs just in 2017 alone. That's the projection. And then according to, they did a study of 148 European travel managers. So these are people that are bringing people from Europe into the US. And then 45% of those companies that they queried said that they will forego meetings and events in the United States, and then that will affect international short-term bookings, but meetings and events 4 to 5 years out, they're not making a ton of changes in their planning arena. It's just a short-term stuff that they are kind of stuck on right now, and they're not sure if they're going to be actually doing more of that in the future. Okay, so, and then according to Business Insider, okay, so everybody's heard about the state of California, right? The Attorney General there has said, okay, we're not going to be traveling into states that have legislation relating to anti-LGBT. So what that means is that states such as, they won't be traveling to Texas, Kentucky, Alabama, or South Dakota. And actually, there was a group that just canceled their meeting in Austin, and it's the American Association of Law Schools. So they moved their 2018 conference from Austin to Chicago. So we're starting to see some groups starting to do that. Roger Dow, how many know Roger Dow? He's the head of USTA, right? And he said in his recent communication just this week that he urges people not to boycott certain states. He's like, you know, we can do better when we're together. And so he cited in his message that you're really hurting the people that are in the facilities, that are in the hotels, that are in the restaurants. So let's not be starting to do that. So that's an issue. And then, I think the thing that really resonates with people, you know, we had the speaker this morning talking about football. So what that means is that for those universities that are based in California, publicly funded, they will not be doing any games, any football games in Texas and all these other states like they normally would during the football season. So it's kind of interesting how that's going to roll out. Okay, so there is an economic outlook, and this is from the Business to Business Exhibitions Industry in 2017. So the Center for Exhibition Industry Research, they predicted a 2.4% increase in growth for 2017, which is good. I mean, it's not in the negative, so that's the prediction. Obviously, we'll see how it ends up at the end of the year. The exhibition industry, what they do is they monitor, along with other factors, the GDP, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and they use those models to kind of predict growth in the industry. And so they're also saying that there may be a downturn in the industry in the future, which, you know, kind of scares all of us in the room, because we don't want to, I think for, you know, our side of the fence, we don't want to see that. I think for planners, you'd love to see that, because that means it's a buyer's market. But basically what they're saying, there's a 15 to 25% chance. Hello. Of a recession. So if the market doesn't change in terms of the way we treat people coming into the country and how we're treating visitors, that there might be an impact long-term economically and could lead to another recession. So that's, you know, kind of good news, bad news. And then according to associations now, planners, what are they doing? They're pricing, what does that say? Selecting cities that attract innovation. So, you know, I think Gary's going to talk about this later, but how do you make events more interesting and wow factors coming in? That's like a big thing right now in our industry. And then the culinary experience, that has to be there. There has to be something unique about the destination that gets people excited about coming. And then partnering deliverable experiences and delivering those experiences and saying, wow, I'm glad I went, what's going to happen next year? And then, let's see, I need new glasses. Attendees are making business and vacation together. I'm seeing that more with younger folks. They're going into a city for a conference, so they stay either pre or post and do other things within that, within the confines of that. And then lastly, planning with host cities to deliver unique meeting experiences. So for instance, so people will go to the destination marketing organizations such as Canada or any of us across the board, any of the bureaus, and they will look to us to help them get that program going. Oh, so the last point was online venue research. There was a study done that said 90% of all research for destinations comes from online. I'm just curious what the other 10% are doing. You know, so people are using the technology to get information and, you know, to really, you know, hone in on what they need and what can be offered in a destination. So thank you, and I'll hand it over to Gary.
Thank you, Melanie, and it's a pleasure to be here. Good morning to everybody. My name's Gary Schirrmacher, and let me get my slides up here. Okay, so okay, there we go. How about that? So good morning. I'm Gary Schirrmacher. I'm with Experian. We're a Merritt's Global Events company. And I'm going to talk about two things that are really on our customers' minds, and I'm sure that they're on your minds in this day and age, especially the first one. And I don't know how many people in the room have heard of the EMSSI initiative, the Exhibition Meetings Safety and Security Initiative. So only a few. So I want to first thank David Dubois, who's the President and CEO of IAE, for letting me borrow a couple of his slides as he works with professionals from IAVM, the International Association of Venue Managers, as well as ESCA, which is the Exhibition Service Contractors Association. So it's kind of a joint effort by these three organizations to really work with the government as well as the private sector to address safety and security issues surrounding exhibitions. So back in 2002, the National Preparedness System was created by Presidential Policy PPD 8, and that was put into place to really address issues including terrorism, cyber attacks, even natural disasters. At that point, there wasn't as many active shooter type issues in the world as there are today. So as we've morphed in 2013, NIP was created, the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, and it's an interesting plan that really this group with EMSSI is working very closely with, where there's 16 different identified infrastructure things. So whether it's a convention center, or it's a bridge, or it's a road, or it's buildings, there's 16 different factors that this group is addressing. And obviously the most important one to us are venues and places where people gather. And we all know that, you know, recently these are the kind of things that are being targeted. So it's, you know, an important initiative that they're working on. And part of that relates to the Safety Act. So the National Safety Act is an initiative that is allowing private companies to create technology and different types of you know, things that help prevent terrorism. And what the National Safety Act does is it really protects these companies from litigation. So it encourages the private sector to develop this kind of technology that is going to help you know, the police, different security organizations to, you know, be able to, whether it's a canine unit or cameras, different things that are being developed that make it easier not only to identify where problems might be, which in our industry, it really, you know, two of the biggest focuses are active shooter and liquid explosives. Really, I think it comes down to, you know, what can people bring into a building like this? And, you know, the challenge is it's such a double-edged sword. You want to have security. we want everyone to be safe at our events, but how do you make it secure but still make it convenient when people aren't standing in line for hours and hours and hours? So the nice thing about all of this is that we're working with people who have established best practices like the NFL, Major League Baseball, different energy companies. So we're working together, and the NIP, or the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, is active in all 50 states. So it is everywhere in this country, and it's something that's very much top of mind. So you can kind of see with this slide, I know it's a little hard to read the certifications, but private business is able to be certified through the National Safety Act to protect themselves and encourage more of this innovation, more of the development of the kind of products and service areas that are going to protect our attendees. So we always ask, what more can we do? And I took two examples, one the International Council of Shopping Centers and the other American Water Works Association. And I know there's quite a bit of text here, but the bottom line here is associations are stepping up to participate in some of these activities. And with so many scientific and engineering societies represented here with ACCESSE, I'm sure many of you are looking at this within your own organizations and how you can, really take the part of, business that you're looking at and that area that your association's focused at, and turn it around to make sure that you're, really focused on security. And you can see, the International Council of Shopping Centers, obviously a target in many ways. You go to a mall, it's, the public's invited, you go in and out, and, how can they protect, shoppers from, things that are happening, whether it's an active shooter or various things. And then, of course, American Water Works Association really working hard to protect the nation's water. And, it's scary when you kind of think of the kind of targets that our business can be susceptible to. And I've often thought for years, I mean, you take a hotel, people come in and out of a hotel with luggage. Who knows what's in that luggage? Who knows sometimes who these people are? So, hotels are working much, much harder to try to create really solid security behind the scenes. So I'm going to take it and turn all the way around now to another area that folks are interested in, and that is changing the experience for their members and attendees attending conferences. So this is a quick wheel that kind of gives you, and I could go for hours on the subject of experience design. I'm actually a certified designer through the Merits Institute, and we work really hard with groups to, kind of break down and create a process. In the next slide, I'll show you really quickly, a kind of 4-step process you could engage with right away when you're looking to change, maybe a part of your meeting, maybe the meeting itself, maybe something within your organization. But, it all starts with design thinking and having that mindset that, yes, we need to change something and we need to use design thinking to do that. Perspective taking really gets down to who are the personas that are going to your event, not necessarily that they're exhibitors or members, but who are those people? Who are those people, and what really drives them in your conference? And obviously connecting shared values. We look at journey mapping as an important part of design from the time someone gets the initial registration announcement all the way through that journey when they travel to the conference, when they arrive at the conference, during the conference, and then leaving, which is one part that we find many groups don't pay much attention to. You have all these bells and whistles, but then when it's time for people to leave, they just leave. So we're seeing groups doing creative things such as, having the board at the airport, at the end of the meeting, thanking people in the hotels, thanking people for coming, and making, really purposeful actions to say thank you to people. And then lean canvas, you know, it leads into experimentation, and like Dr. Ramirez was talking about, you know, not being afraid to fail. Trying things and not being afraid to fail are all part of design. So fail fast and learn from it. This is a real simple design thinking model that starts with what is, and spending time talking about, okay, what is the current state? What are we currently doing? And then changing your mindset to say, what if? And getting those ideas on the table that, you know, what could it be? And it could be crazy things that you're talking about in the what if stage. And then you move into what wows. And that's what you're thinking, and putting yourself in the position of the personas of the people attending your event and what's going to wow them. What crazy kind of things they might feel entertained with and have a memorable experience, and then really getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's going to work. Because in the what wow stage, you may be having ideas that you can't fund or aren't practical, but getting them out on the table, and you know, no idea is a bad idea in design work. So that's just a real easy tool that you can bring back to your organizations to look at a number of things. So those are the two areas that I wanted to highlight, and I sure appreciate the opportunity to be here and participate on this panel. So turn it over to Dave.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to talk about top-line trends in the hospitality and meetings industry. There we go. All right. For those of you who have been on a planet for the last 5 years, it is solidly, unlike anything we've ever seen before, a seller's market. It's the best extended time that the industry has seen, and by that I can show you here that you see the occupancy from 1990 through current day. There are 3 peaks, and the closest one to the one we're in now was in the mid-90s. And it looks like a fairly senior audience, so you probably can remember those glory years before 9/11 hit. So, and of course, 9/11 and the 2003 recession hit, went way down, and then it came back up 4, 5, 6, and 7. 8 started again. So now we're really seeing the best of times. And it should continue. You hear some rumblings, and obviously Melanie covered some of those, but the development of new hotels is mostly select serve, limited serve hotels. There aren't many hotels with big meeting space allotments coming online. So that tends to erode some of the blocks at the larger hotels, but it's not really affecting the market conditions wholesale like it did back in the 90s and the 2000s. So obviously rates and occupancies are at all-time highs. And here's an interesting statistic. You all know this, but lead times at larger hotels in many cases is inside 90 days, and in smaller hotels it's inside 30 days. And here's a real sobering statistic. 40% of the leads that are sent go unanswered. So 4 out of every 10 leads you never hear back from. So it's very interesting out there, and it goes along with what it says next, and that is that it's transactional and not relationship driven. Back in the old days, and I'm talking about the early 70s when I got in the business, you really had to form long-term relationships, not only with the meeting planner, but the executive at organizations, and you kept those relationships for, in my case, 40 years. Today, it's all transactional, and it's not who you know, it's how fast you can produce, the response, the turnaround. And as you all know, this is another obvious situation. Hotels are getting more difficult to deal with. If you've read the news lately, on the transient side, Hilton and Marriott are extending the cancellation requirements from 24 hours to 48, in some cases 72. IHG just instituted one for 24 hours. They did not have one. And you're going to see a lot more of that. And for anybody that negotiates contracts, you know that a lot of things have been taken away. So, and that happens when the market is so skewed one way versus the other. Here are rate for the last 5 quarters. And you can see that the statistics go, in first quarter 16, rates went up 3.2%. Now, this is per quarter, 2.6, 2.8, 2.0, and 2.5. So rates are going up pretty quickly. And that's not a surprise. And of course, there are pockets of availability. But by and large, what's happened over time is that where there used to be peaks and valleys in a lot of cities, off-season, peak season, non-season, those are being evened out. And many cities now don't have peaks and valleys like they used to. It's going to be hard to read, but the top 20 markets, you can see Washington, D.C., of course, for those of you who try to book business in D.C., rates are up substantially year over year. And even in Miami, while it's red, it doesn't mean that they're suffering. It just means that the rates are down year over year. So everybody's doing very well these days. Consolidation. We all know about Marriott Starwood, IHG Kimpton, Accor Fairmont, but there are right now in process 40 potential acquisitions or conversations about acquiring hotel companies. 40. So it's going to continue, and for years we talked about consolidation, and we never really saw it, and now we're seeing it, and that is going to affect the landscape substantially. Are there any Marriott people in the audience? How many of you can rattle off the 30 brands you now have? I'll give you $100 if you can. It's really hard. And it was hard enough at Starwood to remember the 8 brands, or now Hilton. So it's very, very difficult out there to try to figure out where to put your business and what's best for the customer. There are clouds, as Melanie mentioned, on the horizon. America continues to shoot itself in the foot, no pun intended. The isolation issue is certainly affecting gateway cities. And then on top of that, we have the Supreme Court that did rule in support of a partial travel ban, and now you have 12 states. The Texas bathroom ban is kind of in the news these days. There are 12 states that are potentially enacting some type of legislation that's going to be affecting customers. And so, if you start to remember back, how many of you were alive for the ERA? Okay, 2 of us. Great. So. The ERA obviously set this whole motion. Language in contracts before that never mentioned any kind of discrimination. And now almost every contract today will have a clause that says if there is any type of discrimination against our group, we're reserved the right to pull this meeting and put it somewhere else. So you can imagine, Texas right now, they're looking at a minimum of $66 million that's directly affected. That's not the economic impact. That's just simply groups that aren't coming that they knew about. And that's just only the hotel and the related. So you extrapolate that over 10 states, 20 states, and it's going to be a free-for-all if this isn't kind of fixed. Terrorism, as Gary mentioned, it's almost commonplace now. We've almost accepted it as being a day-in, day-out routine, which is kind of scary. But, it is affecting those cities that do have terrorist acts occur. Paris, London, those cities are suffering, drops in occupancy simply because of those. Disruptive technologies, we all know about those and how they've changed the landscape. Just in the news today, Chris Nassetta was talking, and I love the way they spinned it. Sorry, no offense to Hilton. But Chris Nassetta said that Airbnb is actually not a competitor of Hilton's. It's actually an inadvertent ally. And what he meant by that was that when you deal with the OTAs, the online travel agencies that everybody now deals with, Airbnb has almost created a pathway for the other hotels to draft in behind. And so it's interesting how Hilton perceives Airbnb as not quite a competitor, but yet a competitor. And an interesting thing that's happening is that while there's consolidation at one end of the spectrum and senior level people are losing jobs, at the lower end of the spectrum in many cities, and quite a few cities, they're having labor problems. They cannot find restaurant workers, they can't find maids, they can't find back of the house. I live in Charleston, and Kiowa is literally bussing in people now. Charleston's bussing in people. They're trying to figure out where to actually build places where low-income people can live while they work at hotels or related. So that's a very interesting dynamic that needs to really be fleshed out. And you know, the one thing that, for those of us who've been around a long time, we're only one instance away from economic disaster, and we don't know where it's coming from, and we don't know what city it's going to affect. And if you're in Dallas, Texas, I'm sure you're looking at your books right now going, oh my God, am I going to lose this group or this group? And so every way that the industry tries to protect itself, it finds that it's very porous and very fragile, and we're at the mercy of everybody else. So it's the one trend that we'd love to be able to, you know, defense, as Roger Dow tries to defense every day, but it really isn't that way. It really is very reactive. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rocco, and Rocco will talk a little bit about some micro trends.
Thank you, sir. And first thing I have to do is a legal disclaimer from my Hilton corporate partners. This is my opinion. This has nothing to do with Hilton. Has nothing to do with their opinion. I don't speak for them. I don't pretend to know what they're even talking about. This is just me, okay? So knowing that, we can go a little forward. So isn't this all good news? We have terror. We have people that can't come to the country. We have security issues. We've got Dave over here painting how bad hotels are to do business with. It's awesome, okay? It's just Hilton, actually, you know? So again, this is a little more micro into what David was on. This is just where I got some of my sources. This is actually part of a 65 slide thing. You're not getting nearly that. But this is just so you have some background as to where I'm using it from, who I'm stealing it from, because yes, I'm stealing all the data. Okay, I tried to compile it the best way I could, called friends and favors and stuff. This is what it looks like. This is the industry forecast. This is where, this is US. This kind of mirrors what Dave had by quarter. This goes back just in full years. Supply, demand, and the RevPAR. Hotels care about the RevPAR, okay? So it's showing you that it is a kind of, there's still growth. There's still 2%, 1%, 1.8, 1.7. So call it on an average, nice round numbers, 2%, is everything's growing. Demand's going, supply's going, RevPAR's going. That's good news for the hotels. Okay, it's good news for planners in that you're getting demand. People are still coming and attending meetings and going to travel, so that's good. It's good for the hotels because we're building more of them, giving you more place to go to. And then the RevPAR, of course, we're able to charge more for it because it's good that we have the demand. So it's good for everybody in a way. Now you could take that, look at data, and flip it any way you want. You could say, but you know, with all that demand and all of that supply, why are you overcharging us? So for-profit companies, remember that. This gives it to you a little bit by type of chain scales that are there, upper upscale, upper mid-scale. And I couldn't tell you which one of my brands fit into half of these because they've changed it all around all the time. But again, some more great numbers showing you 17 versus 18, 18 being in the darker red, and where the RevPAR growth is. It is in the upper, you know, in the upper upscale, the luxuries. That's where a lot of the money always comes through. Where we all sit for a lot of the meetings is in the upscale and the upper upscale, and start touching the mid-scale areas. So that's what's important to planners, is to see where it is. And luckily, those are the arrows that are staying the most down. And again, I'm not going to go into all of these different numbers. We can drill down till we're blue in the face. And again, you can translate data any way you'd like. I'll put my spin on it. You can put yours on it. It doesn't matter. These are just it's just data. Okay, and here's a nice little chart that my admin made up for me to show you how this goes. Look at that circle. Look at that comment. Okay, everything next year is going to be, for RevPAR, all rate driven. Yes, there's increased demand. Yes, there's increased supplies. And David told you before, it's right now, it's a supplier's market, and we're driving the rates. And again, I'm not speaking for my company. I'm speaking as an industry. This is Smith Travel, Price Waterhouse Coopers report. That's what's happening. And I'm the honest guy in the room. Yeah, we're charging you more. Yes, we're driving rate. Yes, we're all trying to make those decisions. And with David telling you a little bit about trends, everything's short term, 90 days, 30 days. And 40% of the RFPs go unresponded to is because people don't have time for it because we're so quick. So we're looking at the one that can get us the best return. That's life. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just telling you that's life in the hotel industry. I don't know if my colleagues agree with me on that or not, but it is what it is. Lots of numbers, just to show you how it breaks down again. I'm going to read every one to you so you understand it. No, I'm only kidding. Again, it just shows you the 2% numbers in 17 and 18, the demand and the RevPAR growth, the changes in RevPAR. It's all the same numbers, and a 2% RevPAR growth is a healthy economy. That is a really good number for the hotel industry. If we keep it at 2 or better, we're really doing well. When it drops below that, that's where we're not doing so good. You can see way back in 8 and 9, the numbers are negative. That's where we all took the hit. So, and this breaks it down again by scale. So I'm not going to delve too much into the numbers. The overall trend is that there is demand, there is supply. The occupancy percentage is kind of interesting because that's like a global number, U.S. number. 64%. It doesn't even sound like we're full, right? But how often do you call somewhere to try to get a room and you can't? 64 seemed really low to me overall as a trend, but when you factor in all of the areas that, leisure travel and the Hampton Inns in the world and the Courtyards of the world, this is actually a really realistic number. So even though we're only filling our hotels 60% of the time, it's enough to drive a 2% RevPAR growth. So enough for us to drive another 2% of hotels and build more and hopefully keep you coming along. Right now, a big number. This is pipeline. This is trends into the future. I was able to steal some information from friends, colleagues, reports, annual reports to show you who's doing what where. The little blue line is the number on the bottom, which doesn't actually show almost on any bar. So that number that you see at the bottom of the screen on each column is what the projects are, and then number of projects, and then how many rooms it is. So when you see how many rooms there are right now this is Q1 2017, pretty big numbers. 1.9 million rooms getting ready to be built. In the pipeline, signed, ready to go. So a whole lot of supply coming online. A lot of it, where is it? Shows you where. Everybody says everything's growing in China, everything's growing in India. That's where all the growth is. Not really. When you look at these number of hotels, this is showing you there's still a lot in the US, still a lot in Americas. A lot of this could be Mexico, a lot of this could be Canada, and a lot of it is mid-scale. So there's no real huge big boxes coming on in the United States. There's none coming on around the world. It just doesn't happen. They're all little. But you do have the China growth is probably second. I actually sected it out here for you. But just to give you an idea of where some of that growth is. Huge numbers, though. 1.9 million rooms is a lot of rooms. Okay, putting it this way, if you want it, this slide came out, Smith Travel Report, as of like a week ago. I stuck it on here at the last minute, so I haven't had time to analyze these numbers. But look at 0.17% growth, 0.20. This is awesome change, right? They're just showing that in Europe, it's really got huge numbers finally starting to grow there. So, again, just to give you a little more data, still supporting the same comments that I was making about occupancies up and what have you. Give you that. This shows you who's in the lead. And regrettably, I'm only the bolded guy in number 2, but the big 5. If you're interested in those numbers, for no other reason, I put it on there just so you could see it. The big guys are the big guys. The top 3, we own a huge percent of the market. And whether you do it through acquisition or organic growth, it doesn't matter. We're still all growing. And here, I divided those numbers out by type of hotel, so you can see the rooms. I'm only going to give you a couple seconds. I don't want to waste a lot of our time on it. That's it for what I was going to say. But again, for me, that's my opinions. So I see that, yes, we're in a driver's market, a seller's market. We're driving it right now. We're going to drive the rate. Unfortunately, you're going to pay it. The trends that they were showing before, also with lead time, there are some of the associations that are so far out there, lead time, that are 5, 6, 7, and 8 years. They're right now probably getting the better part of it because they're able to move around dates a little bit. They're able to find cities that might have that hole in it. And there's always one-offs. Everything in a trend is a conversation about what's generally going on. You're always going to find an exception. So that's just the other part of that, too.
Well,
So other than that, we gave you no information at all.
as a planner, I've got quite a few questions. Who do we have in the audience that are planners? Can you raise your hand? Is this on? I know, right? That was some good information, and thank you all. And I really do appreciate kind of your honesty and transparency, and that's why we're having this panel, so that we can have discussions like this that you may not be able to do in your daily work days. You know, we had a lot of visuals, a lot of statistics, a lot of numbers, graphs, charts. If you're interested in that, the slides will be made available afterwards, so you can dive a little deeper into those if you're interested. But we do have a lot to discuss, and this is meant to be for everyone. I am going to kick us off with a few questions, but if you have questions, please make your way to the mics, and we can get started that way. But I am going to start with Gary. As a meeting planner, security right now does kind of keep me up at night. ASHRAE has been making more of an effort to have a plan. As a planner, are there 2 questions, 3 questions that we should be asking our venues as it comes to planning for things like this? I mean, it's the way the world is right now. You're right. I think Dave said it. We're only days away from something happening. So what advice do you have for people like me?
The biggest advice I would give is to engage with the local police, fire, emergency folks, whether you need to go to your DMO to get that access or, you know, through the venue. It's really important to understand what their plan is if something were to happen. It's amazing how these organizations, they know what they're going to do. I mean, there is a set process, and if you don't know that process, you may be doing things and making decisions that, you know, conflict with what that process is going to be. If something happens, they don't just shoot from the hip.
Right.
They have a set way that they handle anything from a cyber attack to you know, a terrorist, active shooter, natural disaster, but to have a relationship with law enforcement, with emergency, you know, fire, ambulance service, understanding where the hospitals are, knowing, you know, them knowing that you're in town is really, I think, the most important part. Because usually you just go to a venue and say, hey, what's your security plan? They give you a plan, you never read it, and, you know, they probably haven't maybe read it, though I think venues are more proactive. But that would be the number one thing. And then number 2 is it's just educating your people. If you see something, say something. And that has to be part of all of our lives, whether we're at an event or whether we're traveling on leisure. If you see something, say something. Make sure that your folks that are there in the building know where they can go to say something. Is it on social media? Is there a desk for that? Is there a place? But everyone knowing if they see something odd, that it is okay and you're making it okay for them to say something.
Yeah, that's great. And you want to go ahead?
Thanks. Can I ask a question of the planners? Before you select a site, do you require safety and security information to be given? And do you talk about it before you actually confirm a site? Do you approve it? Do you all have processes? Because I know that there's some very large meetings in here. Thanks so much.
Did you set that up? You know,
facilities. We only look at facilities that will meet our security requirements.
Does anybody not do it? Let me turn it around. I meant to really, not that I want to put you on the spot, but.
Actually, we, not to drop names again, But Conference Directs knows our requirements. So if any of those hotels do not meet our requirements, then they're not even considered in the plan that we will look at for possible potential facilities.
Well, I want to add on to this really quickly. You know, we talked about the planner talking with the venue and really making sure that your plans correspond so that the venue knows your plan and you know the venue's plan. What about communication? And this is twofold. Communication to staff who's traveling to our conference. I don't know about the other planners in the room, but ASHRAE has 60 staff members that go to our winter and annual conferences. How do you communicate to staff, but then also communicate to your attendees in a manner that is calming yet professional and direct?
Do you want me to take this as well?
Anyone.
Okay. You know, you know, it's so commonplace to have a know before you go type communication. And, you know, people do read it because it tells you what to wear. And most people are very concerned about what to wear. So when you include this kind of information in those communication pieces that people are going to read before they go, that's part of the step of it. So, you know, but you can say it in a way that, you know, is positive and, you know, in a way that you just expect everyone to look after everyone else. And, you know, and then social media is a great way to get the word out. I mean, let's face it, you know, most people have access to Facebook or Twitter, you know, even some meetings, you know, heavily on Instagram, but, you know, not just choosing one source of social media, trying to, you know, get that word out in, you know, all the messaging through social media that you have, because, you know, and texting's becoming more popular as well. And you can see hotels are actually really effectively using texting. They're getting the cell phone number, they're texting out. So if there is an emergency, they're able to text every single person that checked in because they're capturing that, they're sending a welcome message. So, you know, texting is pretty effective as well.
I would just agree with what you said there, getting it out on the know before you go. You know, 20 years ago, if you put a section in there on security saying we did, you know, X, Y, Z to do our due, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm scared to go now." Now it's it's the way it is. We all understand that there's going to be a security part to it, and it's all going to be looked at. And tell them you did your due diligence. Let the staff know so they can feel comfortable going, especially if it's to an area that may be a little, which when you first booked it may have been totally safe and great. It may start to be a tad questionable. You may say, you know, the board's looked at it, we've analyzed it, we've been there, we've talked to the security people, we're good to go. We wouldn't bring you into we don't think we'd bring you into a dangerous situation. We feel comfortable bringing you. And that's the communication key that would have part of that too.
Thanks.
Okay. I want to answer Dave first on the safety. I do put what our safety requirements are in RFP, but I have a problem with it's not as important to the board. And they make the final decision on the venue, so I may stress upon them that this may be a problem, but they may just be looking at rates and things like that. So it's not a priority for them, so then it makes it a little bit more difficult for the planner. In terms of communication, yeah, communication is very important for me. I bring over 30 staff members to just run the meeting, and we actually have our own pre-cons, and we have to review that, what our emergency plans are, and what the rate of calling in case of emergency, that sort of thing, before we even get on the airplane.
Well, and I've actually seen some groups that invite local law enforcement, you know, local emergency response organizations to their pre-con. So that way, you know, those folks are understanding what the goals and objectives of the conference is, and they're engaged with these thousands of people that are going to be hitting their city, you know, for 3 or 4 days.
So we have we do about 25 plus events here. Jim Forlenza with SAE. So we're doing about 25 plus events a year. We're in different size facilities. We're in convention centers like Cobo. We're in hotels for our smaller meetings and whatnot. We do invite local police in, work very closely in the case of our largest event in Detroit with Cobo and all the local officials there and our security teams. We do the know before you go. We work with our staff. So we kind of have all that kind of stuff, which is nice and it's good to talk about, but the real issue that's missing here on the security end is the physical security part of it, right? And who, at some point, we're soft targets. At some point, real dollars got to be put into facilities for scanners, x-ray machines, whatever that case may be. And I think what's happening within our industry right now is that you're getting a lot of whose responsibility is that? Is it the facility's responsibility, or is it us as managers' responsibility, or is it a combination? Is it the city? You know, who needs to do that? So I'm curious, in the groups that you're sitting down and talking to, are those conversations coming up, and how far are we away from really having some sort of a physical implementation in place?
You know, Jim, it's interesting. We have a group that it's surgical care centers, and it meets major cities. And their move-in day in Boston, the marathon occurred. And that's all I need to say there. And because of their members, obviously, they were very participatory. They totally changed their outlook on security and safety, and so did Boston. And unfortunately, what I said about our industry earlier is that we're very reactive. We're knee-jerk. We don't really have a plan. Baltimore now has a plan. Detroit has plans because of the environment in their cities. But it takes a cataclysmic event. It takes a murder. It takes, you know, an attendee to get mugged to have everybody wake up. And that's unfortunately the way our industry has operated for many, many years. So to your exact point, the cities that have experienced terrorist acts or, you know, New York City is a pretty buttoned up place these days. And it requires money from the city, and it requires a participation between the group and the board, Penny. You know, if the board's not going to look at security as being one of the criteria, that's a tough one. You know, what do you do? And unfortunately, you can see the writing on that wall as somebody does get hurt or something happens. They'll look at it the next time around. But, you know, trying to be proactive sometimes in our industry is lost on, unfortunately, volunteer boards. So.
Well, and I would just say, you know, the initiative, you know, EMSSI, I mean, it was created for the exact reason that you're talking about is, you know, how can venues, how can event spaces partner with the, you know, public sector, government, as well as the private sector to enhance their security. So you're seeing things like, you know, they'll bring dogs in to just train, and it won't cost anything because it provides a great training ground, you know, for those dogs. So you're seeing more of that kind of activity. You're seeing more invitations by facilities to say, okay, you know, we'll feed your police at our employee cafeteria. We'll feed your emergency responders at the employee cafeteria. So you have people coming in and out, but I think from a cost standpoint, you're gonna find it's gonna fall on us in many ways to get to the level of security that we feel most comfortable with in a venue. I think you're kidding yourself if you think that you shouldn't be budgeting more and more for security each year and looking at it as a line item that may be part of your, you know, maybe you're increasing your registration fee $50 to try to protect the people that come to your event.
And that's all a function of how much do you want versus what you're going to get. I'll relate it to Wi-Fi. How much do you buy versus how much do you get automatically? It's the same kind of level of security. Where do you want to fall? You may have an association that wants to be right up, you know, like El Al up top. Well, you're going to spend the most money then. Mm-hmm. You may have an association of that doesn't even care about security. Well, then your costs are going to be down here. So it's a trade-off. It's like the TSA lines. It's a trade-off of how much security do you want for how much freedom do you want to be able to walk through those lines. There's a balance to everything. So I think you have to figure that part out, what fits right for your groups.
I just want to. I just want to comment on one thing about, and I can only speak to hotel security, but what's important, and hopefully this will help you with your staff, some of it securities become table stakes because you just assume we have it, and we do. But what's important to do is to take advantage of what's already there. The director of loss prevention at most of any hotel, any major chain, knows everything about securing that building. And we're not asking those questions at the pre-con, and we probably should as planners and staff. You go around the room, the guy says, I'm with food and beverage, I'm with director of loss prevention, we're trained in CPR. No, ask more questions because they really are trained. The New York Marriott Marquis, it's incredible what they know about security in New York and in Times Square, as does the Hilton, as does the Sheraton. Because in security, what's important to know is what we don't tell you, because we're making you secure. So if you're in Times Square and something happens in Times Square, do you know that every reader, I'm calling them reader boards, but all the signs tell you what to do? So if something happens at the Marriott, that sign in the middle of Times Square is going to tell you to go up to the Sheraton. There's a huge, and that's a Times Square district, there's things that are going on in major cities that we're just not asking the questions, and they're there to protect you. But, so I hope that helps a little, because it's there, and you can educate your staff, and just, or privately talk to the director of loss prevention.
Yeah, thank you, that's great. Any other questions or comments on security before we move on to another topic? Now that we're all scared, right? All right, let's talk about travel bans. Melanie started off to talk about travel bans and how it can affect our industry. I'm curious if anyone on stage has clients that have directly been affected either by the travel ban or by anything politically in the past. You know, we had a few years ago with the state of Indiana. I'd just like to hear, I guess, some case studies of what you all have dealt with personally.
We just had a group that was surprised, unfortunately. It's the American Counseling Association, and they booked Nashville. And of course, they were really looking forward to Nashville. And unbeknownst to them, very late in the game, Nashville passed a very contentious law about counseling. And so literally less than a year out, we were forced to move American Counseling Association from Nashville, and of course trying to find a site. And amazingly enough, of all places, we replaced them in San Francisco. They had a hole. But it was very costly to ACA, and in fact, Richard Yep, who is the CEO at ACA, is getting the Key Award this year from ASAE in no small part because of his determination to do the right thing. And if you take that and multiply it times the number of groups that have specialty issues, it's very hard to find an educational group, any 11 DuPont, 1 DuPont Circle groups that don't have some issue, some anti-discrimination language in their contracts. And they're all affected. And every time a state passes or attempts to pass something, they are at risk of losing that group. And a group has to pull the trigger pretty early on with something like that, too. So,
You mentioned travel ban. I just had a cancellation. I'll tell you about it. I'll even name the names. It's the Internet Society. Were booked in San Francisco for 2018, fall of 2018. I got the phone call about a month ago that said their members are afraid that they're not going to be welcome in the United States. We're pulling our program. And they moved it to Europe. So they took it out of the Americas altogether. So yes, it's definitely having an effect down the road. That's 18 months from now. We don't really know what it will look like, but they're not taking the chances. So yeah, that's just one that just happened recently. So it is a real issue amongst all the future groups, really. I mean, how far out will they, those that you had mentioned, yours 4 to 5 years out, they're kind of holding steady. It's more of a wait and see. But next year or two, it's upon us.
I want to ask the audience, are you seeing any pushback from your members on any of those kinds of issues, any of those social issues that we're talking about, whether it be the travel ban? We have certain states that are doing things that, for whatever reason they're involved with. Are you seeing among your membership any pushback on these issues? And if your association or society feels that they have to take a stand on some of these issues. I would be so interested to hear if that's been an effect that you're seeing right now.
Hello? Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. This is really timely for me because our big hot issue right now is the LGBT washroom issue, and we've got several states booked for meetings, and our board of directors is just pretty much advising us to either back out or, check into the legislation. We're a diversity and inclusion society, and we just, would not feel comfortable going into those states.
It's interesting that with the whole bathroom issue, I mean, I've thought quite a bit about this, especially, we have groups, obviously in Texas and are quite concerned and looking to take action. My thought is we're going to be living in a world where instead of having a public bathroom, you're going to have 10 single bathrooms with a locked door, and that buildings are going to have to adjust how their bathrooms are. And I would imagine that there's smart people out there that are thinking about, how can I convert, to a single bathroom. Anybody, man, woman, kid, whatever they are, can go in that bathroom and have privacy. And how do you take this open space and make it closed space to protect the interests of everyone? Now, call me crazy, but, let's look at it. It's costing these destinations seriously. I mean, North Carolina, now, Texas, this is going to be devastating for them. But where do you go? I mean, because in 2 years, I leave Texas, I go somewhere else, and then they pass a law. So then I go, so where does it end? And I think we have to, as a society, address the issue of privacy in restrooms. That's just my own personal opinion.
So to answer the question, you come to Canada.
Sounds good.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Okay, so I lived in Toronto for 10 years. Every concert that I went to, the bathrooms were co-ed. And you know what? I'm here. I'm fine. So it just blows me away that, I mean, I get it in certain states, but you have an entire country, or when you go to Europe and you go to World Cup soccer, whatever it is, those bathrooms are always co-ed. And I don't ever remember hearing about something bad happening in one of the washrooms because of it being co-ed. It's crazy.
You're seeing a lot.
Yeah, they have urinals. It's not like you're like checking everybody out as they're standing by the urinals. You're going in there to go to the bathroom. Sorry.
Dave wants to send you to Washington to advocate on behalf of that.
Yeah. The funny part is a lot of the ones you mentioned, the facilities changing the way they are, the family bathrooms are becoming those, whatever you call it, whatever the right new term is. And you actually can see the new signs. They have a picture of a man, a woman, and then the picture of the half man, half woman. Have you seen those? That's now the new thing. Oh, yeah. It's the little stick figures. It's a half a woman, and the other side's a man. So they're even out there already. We're trying that. I mean, it's a Band-Aid on a problem for now.
Yeah, and I also think, and part of what Judy Kent is saying is sometimes there are manufacturing problems that don't really exist. So I think on the other side of it, you have a lot of people that are protective of, their significant other, their kids, whatever. And there's two ways of looking at it. I was talking to someone recently who's well-traveled, and she said to me, well, we got a vet who's going into the bathroom. And I said, okay, so if you enact a law, how do you enforce it? And she says, well, you know, are you going to have guards at the bathrooms, or how's that going to look? And she says, well, yeah, there has to be guards. And I said, so what are you looking for? You know, are you going to be checking people or whatever? And she said to me, yeah, but is always, you know, the fun part. She said, you know, what if something happens? And I said, okay. So I said, you have the law of whether it's, you know, whatever happens, that somebody's assaulting you or whatever, that's the law that's supposed to be protecting you. So the debate is, you know, we have these laws that are coming forward, and I think as a practical thing, how do you enforce them? You know, who's the one that's making that decision on who is able to use that particular bathroom? So it gets kind of slippery when you start going down that road. So that's just my thought.
Any other questions or comments? All right, Rocco, let's talk about these rates that keep increasing. Did anybody else love those comments?
It's called the truth.
Well,
it's not a
thank you.
comment, it's just reality.
I appreciate your honesty. I do want to talk as rates, and we talk about lead time. Several of our panelists talked about lead time, electronic RFPs, relationships. You know, as planners, we are constantly going. Sometimes those online RFP tools are easy and convenient. Sometimes picking up the phone is easier and talking through serious questions and leads. From a hotel standpoint, what do you prefer? What do your salespeople prefer?
Just sign our contract, say yes, and don't worry about it. No, I think there's a need for both, okay? A lot of times if you put in your RFP written that comes to the hotel, we have to meet Monday to Friday, I need 10 sleeping rooms and 500 meeting rooms, which is pretty much every RFP we get now. It's a quick no, done, finish, see you later. Okay, the ratio's off, your dates. Now, if in there you could say, but I'm flexible, I can come in on Saturday or Sunday instead of Monday, well, okay, now I'm gonna look at it again. And you could say, well, I don't really need 500 breakouts, I only need like 250 on one day, and okay, well, let me look at it again. And then it's a conversation of, what do you really need that I can really make fit into my hotel? Well, you know, what's your real needs? Well, I go back to then that should have been your original proposal, but I understand you're working with a board or working with a committee that just loves life the way it's always been, and for 25 years we've had 30 breakouts and only used 20 of them. But we always have them, so let's keep getting them. So I think you have to refine them, you have to make it look right. I think when it becomes close, then it's a conversation. I know from the national point of view, I know Donna and I all the time, we try to get that information first to the hotels. We try to talk to our clients immediately about that. So when we give the information to the hotels, they already have a better definition of what those needs are. And you can't get that necessarily on a written RFP. So the best of both worlds is probably a combination of both. Not so sure one over the other. And then
Anybody wants to sell to you the way you want to buy. So if you want to pick up the phone, we'll talk to you.
oh yeah.
If you want to send us electronic RFP, it's our job to get you back answers. We might have a few questions to support our rates, because if you can arrive on a different day, your rate may be different.
Correct.
About 64% occupancy, but our rates are up, so and that doesn't make any sense, right? But it does, because there's a lot of dates that are still in those years that aren't full. You want to meet during Christmas? Sure, come on in. Then your rates are lower. So, so it's all driven by certain things, so we might have to have dialogue. Flexibility is the key thing.
The key thing about meetings is there's nothing that is the same. Every one of them is singularly custom. So if you're going to go buy a custom anything, there's so much detail involved, we have to get all the details. So to talk about a general trend, well, yeah, you know, generally speaking, you know, if you give us a Sunday night, it's a lot better because Sunday night's the weakest night in the hotel industry. So if you're going to make your Sunday night a peak night, that's the best way to get the lowest rate. Generally speaking, don't try to do that in a resort area where the weekends are high. So there's exceptions to everything too. There's no flatline one answer that covers all that. It's all different variables.
So my question is, of those in the audience that plan events, are you more comfortable with electronic communication? Please raise your hand. Yeah. You know, because some people like the electronic, they can respond right away. Who prefers, you know, the phone call, the face-to-face contact with your seller? Can I see a show of hands? Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. So I think you're right in that people like to work a certain way, and it's important for us as suppliers up here on the stage to say, how do you prefer to communicate? Because a lot of times the way that we are communicating might be different than what you need. So, you know, tell us, you know, I prefer to communicate this way, and we'll adapt to you.
And don't be surprised if when you put an RFP out, we'll send it back. Can't do what you want, but here's an alternative. Change the week, change the date, change the day of the week, or what have you.
Can we have a mic?
Oh, I agree with you. Correct. So, and Donna could justify this too. We try our best to get the people on property to read, but as David pointed out in his slide, 40% don't even get responded to begin with.
Yeah.
Of the 60% that get responded to, how many are they thoroughly reading through? I don't know if you want to come.
Penny, do you have a national salesperson with most of the major organizations?
I have one for every, yes.
You do?
Except Omni, I don't know who that is, but other than that.
Call
and,
Bob
and
Ross.
do you and do you interface with them with your leads? Do you kind of?
What I like to do is, I'll say I'm looking at 23. I'm going to send it to each national person, and I will send it to the CVB person. And so I'm expecting them to get it out to the people I'm looking for, including the center, including who I want for headquarters or whatever. Now, if I don't get it back at a certain time, and my staff, it's a lot of work on our end too, because we're taking each proposal, trying to fit what you gave us and see what fits. But then, suddenly I make a decision, okay, I've narrowed it down to 3 properties, and this is what I'm going to report to my board. And then all of a sudden this property comes back and go, well, I'm sorry, we didn't get it to you in time, or this person's out sick. Well, that's really too bad at that point, you know, because then I've already X'd you out of the thing, because we've got to move forward. And that's really my pet peeve when it comes to RFP, because it's a lot of work on both ends. But when you don't take the time to read what we put together, then I'm not interested in you
You're talking
anymore.
about your annual meeting?
Annual meeting, yes.
What about your other meetings? Smaller, shorter term, situational, regional?
Yeah, but
technical?
that's handled different. That's handled through universities, and it has to be the math department that invites you, that sort of thing. So I don't need an RFP for that. But if I'm looking for hotels in the area, I'm going to contact the CVB person.
Yeah, you know, and I'll pipe into about the CVB. The CVBs have really evolutionized the way that they do business. And the good ones will not waste your time in going after proposals from hotels that you'll never use. You know, they really are more targeted nowadays. So it's always good to make sure your destination marketing organization is like if not the first one you go to, at least make sure they have the RFP in hand, because they can place it appropriately. And in some cases can actually help sell that your piece of business to the hotel community. And we see that all the time where, you know, the CVBs will get together and say, listen, this is what we need to do. I think, who's here from Toronto? Anybody here from Toronto? But they have a system of actually sitting down once a week with all the hotels and finding out what business is pending, what proposals have come in, and they actually sit down and they're very collaborative this way. And they've been very successful with that plan.
Got one question.
I wanted to go back to the electronic RFPs. Can you hold it for me? Thank you. I do like them. However, when it's a citywide and half the information is missing, the things that are required for a CVB to review the center and the hotels, what did you spend in F&B? If you want me to get you a reduced rental, what's your daily pickup for the last 3 years? We're not going to give 2,000 rooms to you if we don't know what the hell you did last year? So for those of you who do use the electronic RFP, these are very important to us because as a CVB, our job is to get you big discounts at the convention center, get promo fund from your city, and if I don't have that information, I won't be able to do it for you.
Yeah, and I think some CVBs are organized in a way where, you know, you can only get that special if you go through them. In other words, if it just goes to the national sales offices from the hotels, you may not be eligible for those goodies, right? So it's always good to make sure that you're talking to the CVBs in the areas you're looking at.
Got one question in the back. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. I also wanted to say the CVB reps will have conversations with the hotels that the hotels would never have with the end user. So they will tell you the stuff that they cannot tell the client, like, well, they'll say stuff that you would never say to a client. And so the CVB rep really is neutral and really is your advocate. So they really know what the hotel is really thinking, but then I can come back and I can say, okay, we need to work on this. And to Melanie's point, when you don't use a CVB, and I would say if you want to use an online RFP format, don't do it for a citywide. It's just, it's like a square peg and a round hole. You really do need to put together a very comprehensive RFP. And you also, a lot of people are afraid to say what their F&B spend was or afraid to share their history because they think they're giving away a bargaining chip. But SMG Convention Center in San Francisco will call the Convention Center in Philadelphia and say, hey, I saw they were there last year. What did they spend on their F&B? And they'll talk to the Marriotts will talk to one another and they'll say, what did you pick up? You're not giving away a bargaining chip. You're actually helping yourself. Because when they can see up front that you've got a really solid pickup history, that you're not overstating how many rooms you really need because you think you're going to get more, from the hotels because you're saying you're going to give them more than you actually are. It's just better to work with the CVB on a citywide bid and also to work with the CVB on a self-contained piece of business because they do have those conversations with the hotels that the hotels would never have with the client. And then the CVB rep will go back and they will package it very nicely and they will negotiate, as Melanie said, between the supplier and the end user. So I am from a CVB, but I'm a huge advocate of it because a lot of people are scared to use the CVB. That old thought that if I send it to the CVB, they're gonna send it out to everybody. We don't do that. We don't do that because that actually spoils the relationship. We ask you, who do you want to go to? Or we'll see your specifications and we'll see you are actually missing a really good property or a really good venue, and we'll pick up the phone and we will call you and we will tell you, you're missing this one. Is it okay if I send it to them? So the other thing is, don't be angry when a CVB rep comes back to you and says, hey, I understand we were too expensive. What can I do to get the price down? I once had a meeting planner say to me, if you gave me a price tag of $200,000 on rent, and then I found out later that you knocked it down to $100,000, I would have been a fool to take your rental price tag for $200,000. And the reality is CVB reps have bargaining chips when they find out what the other cities are bidding. And then we can go back to our leadership team and our hotel community and our convention center management team and we can say, hey, this other city is giving them $150,000 less on rent and requiring $100,000 less on F&B. When they know that that's the situation and that's the playing field they're in, there's a really good chance that they'll come back and they'll tweak their package because they want the business. So it's really important to use the CVB for a myriad of reasons that sometimes people just don't understand.
And therein lies the art of negotiation.
Thank you for that.
All right, we only have a few minutes. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have one additional comment. I'm a meeting planner from American Oil Chemists Society, and I plan our annual meeting, obviously once a year, somewhere in North America. And I come from a bureau background, and my manager also comes from a bureau background. So we always work with the bureaus, and we're very straightforward and transparent about our needs. We provide a 5-year history of accurate room pickup. We provide a 4-year history on F&B. We break it out by what we spend on receptions and breakfasts and lunch and dinners. And we even give out our AV spend. And, you know, it helps walking in and just saying, here it is. I mean, we're not here to play games. Montreal knows. See, they're like, yeah, they give us all our history. You know? I mean, because we just lay it out on the table, and we want to work with you. We want to be a partner. You know, we're not trying to come in and be dishonest and ask for things we're not actually going to need. I mean, these are the needs. This is why we're asking for, you know, room rates that are low. You can see our wash. You can see how many people we lose when our room rates are too high, things like that. So I think in the end, it really works, not only working with the Bureau, but also with your end properties, because, you know, in the end, you're partners, and you want to win, and they want to win, and so why not just be upfront from the beginning? So we've seen success with that model.
Thank you for those comments. Those are great. We only have a few minutes left in the session. I have one more question, and this one's for Dave. What do you see as the biggest threat to our industry?
The dehumanization of hospitality. And I know that may sound a little odd. You know, there are hotels you can actually walk into, check into, and never see a human being. And in no small part, we're going to see more of those. You see that the younger generation is really having a hard time talking to customers. They'd rather just get it electronically. And so, you know, sounding like an old person, which I think I am, it really is what I see. And, you know, I am very vested in the industry. You know, my brother was at Hilton. I have 2 kids that work in sales at Hilton and an Omni, so I can help you with the Omni national salesperson. So, but I truly see that we're headed to, and by the way, you know, this, and no offense to AOAC, it's not really a win-win. It never has been. We make it a win-win because that's what we say it is. It's a win-lose. And you know, in this environment, the buyer is the loser as much as, you know, unfortunately it is. When the economy turns, the hotels will be amazingly cooperative and helpful. Everybody will fall over and you'll get the concessions back that you haven't seen since 2009 and 11. But, you know, to homogenize the world and say everything is great and we're partners, it is worked out with relationships. And what I fear is that the art of relationships is quickly evaporating. And so hopefully you don't see that, but I do see people who are very disinterested and are not being trained to try to create relationships. I think we in this room are here because we have relationships with people. But it's the people who are not here, or it's the senior people at hotel companies or in other environments that are just not getting that it is all about people. So that's what worries me about the business.
Well, I think, you know, when I asked the question, how many of you prefer the phone or this face-to-face, a lot of hands went up. So I think there's still this desire to have that relationship, and we probably can be doing a better job of it. So I think you're right.
Any final questions? What about final comments? Oh, okay, great. We're bringing you a microphone too.
You know, Dave's a great partner, Conference Director, a great partner with all of the hotel chains. And he talked about hotels being difficult to deal with. And quite honestly, we kind of are. Cheryl and I are like, yeah, well, sometimes we are. But there's one thing, you talked about the cancellation policy. This has to do with rates and cancellation policies and ability to work with the sales folks. The cancellation policy further out, it's 72 hours now. That was a need because people would cancel and we didn't have time to resell the room. Now we're reselling the room because we have, at 60,000 feet, Arnie Sorensen, the CEO of our company, we have a responsibility to our owners to drive revenue and get that revenue in there. And then it's cyclical. You just said how many jobs are going out. Well, we got to keep people employed too. So I want to leave on that note that sometimes there's a bigger picture in mind, that we're just not trying to screw Penny's group. You know, I told you last year I want you to feel good about your rate. But anyway, there's always that, the vision of these larger corporations, Hilton, Hyatt, Marriott, is, you know, is our responsibility to our owners who own the buildings to get the return on their investment. And we have so many brands so that we can attract all these travelers. The brands, I can't name the 30 brands, and I'm proud of that because I have a resource to do it. But there's a brand for every traveler. The millennial's gonna stay in a Moxie hotel. The meeting planner's gonna stay in a Hilton or a Marriott or a Sheraton because they need those services. But there's a 60,000 foot reason why we charge what we charge.
Thank you.
And can I piggyback her?
Of course.
And I can name my 13 brands. Thank you very much, and I'm proud of all of them. But piggyback what you said, Hilton just went through the divestiture back in January. We spun off into 3 separate companies. Hilton Incorporated owns no hotels anymore. Don't know if you know that. We don't have any owned and managed anymore. We are completely a fee-based franchise company. So that's also going to, in a way, affect you guys booking meetings, as Donna just said, because we have to now as owners of every hotel, and it's not Hilton. So just a new dynamic that gets thrown into the mix, that for the nth percent that hurts you, that we have to make profits for them too. So just that piggyback there.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask the panelists first, thank you so much for being up here, being in front of your peers, for being honest and transparent. I think this was a great discussion. I want to leave on just if there's any final comments from the 4 of you.
Well, I just want to say thank you for coming and listening. And what we're trying to do is come to an understanding of what we are all going to be facing, not only now, but in the future, and that we can help each other. And, you know, we're here as a resource for you. So if you have any questions about, especially about meeting in Canada or bringing a group into Canada or any of those issues, you know, just let me know or any of our Canadian partners. So thank you.
We're all evangelists for the power of meetings. Our voice together is powerful. We've seen it work. So, you know, be involved, be in the moment, talk with your legislators, send letters, you know, continue to focus on the fact that if we don't have meetings like this face to face, who knows what our world would be like.
And I would just say, this is the trends of now. Next year, if we have this meeting, it could be totally different trends. Okay, we could be in a downturn of the market, and I could be saying, oh my God, please book your business. I'll give you any rate you want. Okay, so you really don't know where it's going. And I don't really want to leave with the painted picture of that we're just charging you more money for nothing. It's not the image I want to leave behind, but there are opportunities. It's just that it's a thriving market right now. The entire economy is doing very, very well. And we're just a part of that as a business doing very, very well. I will say association business forever, it remains consistent. And we really thank you for that. And a lot of times we thank you more in the downturns and we don't thank you in the upturns. But know that sincerely, I can speak for Donna, for Marriott on this one, myself, and Michelle from Hyatt and my other colleagues. We love you all and thank you very much for what you do for us.
On a CESS note, I'd like all of you who are first-timers, how many first-timers are here, any? I'd like you to appreciate how good this organization is in trying to be. This organization is small, but it represents some really wonderful business, and they're trying very hard to have meaningful sessions. So weigh in when you have the opportunity to Sandy or anybody on the staff about the types of sessions you'd like to see going forward, because the program committee was really trying hard this year to put things together that appeal to a lot of different aspects of SES. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And on behalf of the program committee and ACCESSE17 and Tony and Wes, we've got some gifts for our speakers. So thank you all, and thank you all for coming, and we'll stick around if you have any more questions. Thank you. And don't forget to take your survey, please, in the app. Thank you.